Back in December, I set a goal to run a 7-minute pace per mile half marathon. For some, this may be an easy goal. For some, it may be a harder goal. For me, it was easily the hardest I've ever had to push myself. So here's the story of my quest for the 7-minute half marathon. You see, I've never considered myself a runner. In fact, for the longest time, I absolutely dreaded it. Back in high school, I was heavily overweight. At my heaviest in 2011, I was 240 pounds on a 5'6" frame. And even though I was overweight and out of shape, it didn't keep me from playing the sports that I loved, but I absolutely dreaded the conditioning that went along with it because I was always at the back of the group. It wasn't until several years later that I actually started to enjoy running. It was a mindset shift from competing against others to competing against myself. The idea of pushing yourself to go one more step, one more mile is an addicting challenge. It's you against you. Did you put in the training to bring your best physical self to the run? And if you did, are you in the right mental state to push through no matter what your legs, lungs, or heartbeat feels like? You may be asking yourself, why a 7-minute per mile pace? Why not shoot for just like a 90-minute marathon? And truly, it was an arbitrary number, but I picked it because it scared me. I genuinely wasn't sure if I could do it when I set that goal. It made me feel uncomfortable, but I'd rather shoot high and fail hard than shoot low and succeed, so that's what I did. The most important thing I did on this running journey was set up a training plan. You see, I had run for distances or just to complete races before, but never going for a specific time, and it's a complete other ballgame. I quickly did some research about mixing speed runs with endurance runs, set up a Google Sheets training document, and was on my way. What happened next was 97 days of training. I went on 65 runs covering over 270 miles. Some runs in the cold, others at high elevation of 7,200 feet in Mexico City, some runs that absolutely sucked, some when I felt that runner's high. With so much work put in, what happened on the 95th day almost shattered the dream, and everyone around the world as well. COVID-19. Now in the US on the night of March 11th, we were well aware that things were not going well with coronavirus overseas, but I don't think any of us realized just how fast it would start to affect us.
Officially announced that this is a global pandemic.
Many big sporting events have been postponed, businesses as well.
Literally overnight, the half marathon went from we have precautions in place and still plan to hold the race to completely postponed to next year. Once I got that email, I was mad and upset. 14 weeks of the hardest training of my life for absolutely nothing. Or at least that's what I initially thought. After 30 seconds of frustration and then some reflection, I thought, I'm fully rested, fully trained, in the best shape of my life. I'm gonna run my half marathon anyway. So I scouted out my course, enlisted my brother to help get some check-in footage along the runs. And here is where things get fun, ladies and gentlemen. The mile-by-mile breakdown of my half marathon. And it's a nail-biter of a finish. Now, there's not many great places to run 13 miles where I am, so I end up starting out on a main back road for the first 4-ish miles before heading to a running trail that is predominantly gravel. Luckily, race day had some decent weather. It was about 41 degrees and the sun was shining for most of the run. After a nice little dynamic warm-up for about 5 to 10 minutes, it was time to take off. That first mile, I went out in a blistering 6:39. So I think this is probably pretty common for most runners. You just kind of get excited on that first mile. But I knew I needed to pull it back a little bit if I was gonna keep that up for the rest of the race. The second mile was 6:56 and the third mile was 6:51. And right around the 5K mark, I was feeling pretty good, and this was where the first check-in of my race footage comes in. At this point in the race, around the 5K mark, I'm feeling good and cruising along. The one thing that I did notice immediately though was I picked a day and a course where I would be running 13 miles straight into a slight headwind. Not a severe one, but it was in the back of my mind, but I just tried to put it back there and continue the race. The next time you see me, I'm just about 5 miles in. Mile 4 went out in 6:58. And mile 5, I had my first slip up in pace at 7:13. Now I don't know why this mile was slower. I felt absolutely fine. I think I just let my mind wander a little bit, and that's how easy it can be to fall off pace when you're out there just running by yourself. That's why I make sure to have my 1 mile notifications on my watch. I don't like to check it insistently, but 1 mile is a nice pace. The next check-in was 2 miles later. Mile 6 went out in 6:55, mile 7 in 7:03. And this is where I started to notice some issues. So if you notice, once I enter this trail road, the first about mile is still on paved road, but then around mile 5.5, it turns into straight gravel for pretty much the rest of the race. This did 2 things that definitely affected my stride. Number 1, my foot slips a little bit each time on that loose gravel. You know, it's kind of like running on the beach where you push in and then you kind of sink before you can take off. So basically I'm coming down, sliding just a little bit before I can get my push off for the next step. You know, obviously it's not as severe as beach sand, but it was definitely something that noticeable and wasn't making my strides as energy efficient as possible. Number 2, and the thing that bothered me way more, this gravel felt like death by 1,000 cuts. You see, I wear minimalist shoes, which are pretty thin, and after running over 270 miles in these things, they're even thinner of where my foot hits every time. And this gravel, after like 3 miles on this gravel trail, was beginning to rub my feet raw and started to really hurt. So now we move into what I call the mental battle miles. We just passed halfway, still on pace, but there's still a big chunk of race to go, so how are you going to respond? Mile 8 went as smooth as it could at this point with a 6:55, but then miles 9 and 10 were the most awful of the race. I finished mile 9 in a 7:11 and mile 10 in a 7:28. At the end of 10 miles at this check-in, I had a total time of 1 hour, 7 minutes, and 10 seconds, or a 7:01 pace. I'm officially behind time. That 7:28 mile ended up being my slowest mile of the day. I knew that I could not repeat that again if I wanted to reach my goal. With my feet absolutely killing me, but just 3 miles left, I remembered something that Nick Bear had been saying in some of his most recent running journey videos. The suck isn't going to last forever, so just embrace it, and that's what I did. Mile 11, I turned in a 7:04, still a couple seconds off pace, but for how awful I felt in mile 10, this was a win. For mile 12, I turned in a 7:01, still a second off pace, but again, we're making baby steps, and I knew I needed a big push in mile 13 if I wanted to reach that goal. When I hit the last mile of a race, that is a time when no matter how shitty the run has felt for me so far, it's the one I enjoy the most. The end is near, so finish as strong as you can, and that's what I did. With my legs feeling like absolute dead weight, my feet hurting every single step of the way, I turned in my 3rd fastest mile of the day in mile 13 with a 6:53. Now we missed the finish line shot because I sent my brother the wrong location pin, but here's me wandering up after 13.1 miles. My total time was 1:31:50, 8 seconds off what I set out to do, or a 7:01 1 pace per mile. That being said, I'm not disappointed in the slightest. On a more packed trail, maybe not running into a headwind for 13 miles, or running with some competition around me, I may have easily shaved off those 8 seconds, but that's not what matters. What matters and what I'm most proud of is how I finished and got to this point. Over 14 weeks of training, some in the winter on the East Coast, some at 7,200 feet in Mexico City, and especially miles 9 and 10 in this race, there were so many times where I thought, damn, this sucks right now. But getting past each one of those moments is what led me to get dangerously close to a goal that frankly, growing up, I never in a million years would have thought I would be able to do. I've come so far in this fitness journey, and I can't wait for the next challenge. Thanks for watching.